CBS News Pentagon reporter Eleanor Watson joins me now with more on the breaking news having to do with these renewed strikes against Iran. What, if anything, do we know right now, Ellie?
Nancy, what we know is for the second day in a row, U.S. Central Command has announced more retaliatory strikes against Iran in response to that downed helicopter on Monday. This comes after the president did tease retaliation, saying that the U.S. was justified, had the right to hit Iran hard again, and after Secretary Hegseth told reporters just under an hour ago that there would be strikes tonight. They would be, quote, strong and clear, and would be, again, strong and clear tomorrow if they have to strike again. He was framing the strikes as putting Iran in a position where they have to come to the table. This doesn't appear to be the same type of tit-for-tat strikes we've seen over the past month of the ceasefire, in part because the president's language today kind of dramatically changed, where he said that Iran has really taken the U.S. as suckers. Previously, he said Iran wants a deal and has been on the brink of one in potentially a matter of days. Now he is saying that they're taking too long to negotiate and will, quote, pay the price.
Right. The messaging has been all over the map. What do we know about the targets of yesterday's strikes? And do we know anything about the targets of tonight's strikes yet?
Tonight's strikes are again called self-defensive strikes, which were the same as last night. And last night they hit targets including radar sites, air defense systems, and ground control sites near the Strait of Hormuz. Remember, the Strait of Hormuz is what President Trump wants in the first part of any type of deal, is to reopen. And that's where the Apache helicopter was when it was taken down, apparently by an Iranian drone. That has brought these new waves of strikes. And again, in this statement from U.S. Central Command, all they said was they've begun launching strikes. Last night we've completed. And so right now we're just in the initial waves, it seems.
Overnight, the Iranians claimed that the U.S. actually struck a reservoir and desalination plants, basically that we went after civilian water infrastructure. The U.S. military denied that. Have they said anything more about that since?
U.S. officials have not confirmed any of that information from the Iranians, but President Trump today did not rule out that. When he was asked if those types of targets could be potentially hit, he said, we could do that. That's not the same type of language he was using a few months ago. He was using more apocalyptic, end of civilization language to get Iran to come to the table, but he is not ruling out potentially those strikes that would hit civilian targets and potentially be against the law of armed conflict.
Right. There are human rights groups that have said that that would be a war crime if the U.S. were to intentionally strike civilian infrastructure like the bridges and power plants like the president likes to talk about. We know you'll be covering it. Ellie Watson, thank you so much for the update. We want to go now to CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand, who is at the White House. Natalie, what can you tell us about these newest strikes?
Well, we're still waiting, Nancy, to find out exactly what was targeted. But as you were probably discussing with Ellie, the defense secretary did give some interesting information in his remarks a little earlier with reporters traveling to him to CENTCOM in Florida, saying that the strikes tonight would be strong and really are intended to deliver a message. He wouldn't reveal what exactly they were going to be, but said that they were designed to advance military interests and also enhance the diplomatic position, reiterating what the president has been saying, that Iran can still make a deal. But then Hegseth went on to say, if Iran wants to tap the U.S. along, that the Defense Department can negotiate with bombs. And Nancy, as you've been talking about all day, things have changed so much over the past just couple of days, from Monday night when the president was saying that he thought Iran was 2 to 3 days perhaps away from making an initial agreement with the U.S., to then this escalation following the downing of the Apache helicopter, and now this escalation cycle and these latest strikes by U.S. Central Command.
And Natalie, what makes this latest round of strikes so interesting is that despite some of the president's aggressive rhetoric from time to time, it has been pretty clear that from the president on down, there was not a tremendous appetite for restarting hostilities. And yet that is where we now find ourselves. And of course, the question is the ceasefire still on? Does this basically blow up the ceasefire? No pun intended. And then, of course, you've got the ongoing conflict between Israel and Lebanon.
Right, of course, and that factoring into these larger negotiations. And, you know, in the weeks prior to this, when we saw the U.S. saying that they had to take defensive action because of Iranian aggression in the Strait of Hormuz, you know, the wording was really careful by the administration to continue to say these are defensive strikes, that this larger ceasefire is holding. And it did really seem like the president was leaving a lot of room for Iran to come to the table. And the Defense Secretary, again, in his remarks, said that, you know, the administration felt that they're very close to reaching this deal, to codifying this deal. They just have not signed it, and that the U.S. still wants to give them the opportunity to do that. But then again, you had this game-changing incident with the helicopter, and over on Capitol Hill, you know, some Republicans are saying that given that, the U.S. needs to take a much stronger stance. And then you have Democrats saying, well, this doesn't look like the ceasefire is holding at all. And on top of that, you know, congressional authorization should be required at this stage.
Ellie, Natalie just brought up the helicopter, which is what started this whole new round of hostilities. The fact that the Iranians somehow, we don't know exactly how, brought down an Apache helicopter that was flying along the Omani side of the Persian Gulf a couple of days ago, not the Iranian side, the Oman side, which makes all of this more curious. And at some points, the president has suggested that this was an accident, that the Iranians didn't mean to do it. Today, he sounded a lot more aggressive, and he was, you know, and he was very accusatory. So what have you learned from the Pentagon, if anything, about the circumstances surrounding the downing of this Apache?
Well, first and foremost, we have learned the pilots are safe and uninjured after they were rescued by a sea drone. First time that that's been done that we know of in a U.S. military campaign. How the helicopter went down is still a bit of a mystery because, as you said, the president has accused Iran of attacking the helicopter, but it's unclear whether the attack was deliberate, some officials say, or if there was some sort of incident where the helicopter encountered the drone. But regardless, the drone hit the helicopter went down, the pilots were able to evacuate and were rescued by a sea drone. What the Apache helicopter was doing on the Omani side of the Strait of Hormuz is kind of part of this effort that the president talked about today that is helping coordinate commercial ships to get through the strait. There are still hundreds, if not over 1,000 ships that are still bottled up in the strait that the U.S. has been quietly coordinating to help get out without being threatened by Iranian missiles and drones that clearly still do pose some risks to the strait.
We know you'll be covering these ongoing strikes for hours to come. We appreciate you coming down to update us on what you know right now. Thank you so much, Ellie Watson.